Welcome back to the channel. Today we're at the Nicaraguan Cultural Center and I'm joined by Mr. Scott Vines. We finally managed to get hold of him to do the interview. You're a busy man. You know, you were just at the PCA. How was that event? What was it like?
It was fantastic. It was fantastic to see all our cigar makers for the first time in 3 years. It was a very, very busy show for us. Because obviously we represent a lot of the cigar makers,
of course,
that were at the show. So it was good to catch up with them, find out what their plans are, and then now we have to overlay their plans with our plans and see what the next 12, 18 months, 2 years are going to look like. So it's going to be a busy time for us in the UK, and it was a fantastic experience. It's always good.
I can imagine. I mean, meeting up with all these brands and all these companies, are there any new products that we can be excited about? Are there any new brands coming in?
Well, I'd have to kill you if I told you everything.
I'll take the bullet.
But basically, yeah, I mean, with our existing makers, there's a lot of exciting projects that they're working on. You know, one of the biggest challenges for the last couple of years has been supply, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some stage later. So perhaps the newish kind of brands that they would be looking at are not as forthcoming as they might have been in previous years, because obviously you need to make sure they can do regular supply. But yeah, we've got existing suppliers that we work with, or partners that we work with. We have a lot of plans that we now need to fit into our schedule, and with new producers that we don't work with, we're going through a process of working out which ones we should work with and which ones we should prioritise. But what I can say is it's very likely that there'll be new producers coming into the UK in the next 12, 18, 24 months.
It's a lot of
I'm
things.
not going to tell you who. Okay?
Okay. I guess I'll just have to wait then.
You will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of supply, so virtually everyone had issues with supplies. I mean, through COVID, a lot of the factories had to shut down. We've seen the impact of that. You know, there are so many brands that Alex and I love, and we want to smoke these cigars, but we just don't have access to them. I mean, how is that? Is that improving? I mean, what are we potentially going to be seeing in the next year or so?
I would say for us it's improving. We were very proactive at the start of COVID. Well, if you rewind and say at the start of COVID, we had no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. And I actually produced a forecast that showed 3-4 months of nil sales and what impact that would have on our business. And that was pretty terrifying. But that didn't happen. The opposite happened. All of a sudden, people had more time on their hands. So they went out and explored the world of cigars. And from that, happened to be some of our cigars, which was fantastic. So COVID, I think, has been kind to the industry from a consumer perspective, smoking and trying and experimenting.
Absolutely.
However, it's not been so kind for the manufacturing side, because obviously social distancing came into place, so the rolling rooms had to be reduced from whatever to whatever to make it more space for people. Supply of materials, supply of everything became harder, and obviously the lack of transport became an issue because people weren't flying. So if you think about how we ship from Nicaragua by air, there was a reduction in flights to Europe, so the whole thing started to snowball where consumers were looking to try experiment. It left us with issues around stock.
Absolutely,
but not just us, but the whole
the
whole world. So America went crazy,
Yeah.
and they had a 25-year boom. The cigar makers weren't ready for that.
Yes.
The box makers weren't ready for that. The tube manufacturers weren't ready for that. The band makers weren't ready for that. And it's caused supply issues. So it's really interesting. So one of the things we did at the very beginning was sit back and look at the manufacturer, work with the manufacturer, say, right, okay, what year's stock of tobacco do you have? So some people say 5 years, some people say 3 years, whatever. So if you take, I'll try to explain this, if you have stock of tobacco for say 3 years, but your sales increased by 50%, just as an average figure. So your 3 years, you sell 1.5, you've got 1.5 years tobacco left, but you're growing another year.
Yes.
Because you're not prepared for the boom. So you don't have time to grow 2 year stock or get more farms. So you start the second year with maybe 2.5 years tobacco, you sell the 1.5 again, you're left with a year tobacco. So you're then growing like hell to say, right, we've got we can only grow a year this year, we need more farms.
Yes.
Or we need to get tobacco from somewhere, because what happens is once you go through the cycle, you're going to run out of tobacco.
Yes.
So we worked with the manufacturers very early to start increasing our stocks. What complicated COVID for us was Brexit, because most of the cigar makers we deal with in Nicaragua or Dominican or Mexico as well, they have hubs in Europe that they'll ship a container to, and all the European countries would place an order with the manufacturer but get the stock from Germany, Holland, Belgium, wherever. One of the negatives of Brexit is if we do that into this country, we pay a 25% tariff, because we lose the country of origin agreement that's in place between the country and the UK, because we're not buying from the country of origin. So it meant last year we had to change most of our supply chain to direct from the factory. So it meant we're buying more stock to keep the price of shipping down, but it also meant that the days of us getting an emergency order from Belgium for whatever, to if we run out of something, we can't do anymore. So because stock forecasting became is now a major issue, because instead of carrying 3 or 4 months stock, we're now carrying 9, 12, 15.
So you're carrying a lot, so you're quite heavy on the amount of stock you have. But
we always run out of something, always.
but because the demand through COVID went absolutely crazy. And as you said, we didn't have the supply, because we didn't have as much supply to match the demand, and the demand just went completely crazy. And
but it was unforecast. That's the issue.
Exactly.
So if you don't have that planning in place, you're screwed. So what's happening just now is a lot of the bigger makers are actually buying up as much filler and binder as they can from the growers. So there's tobacco growers out there selling top dollar to the big guys who can afford it. So if we look ahead to where this is going, it kind of supports what our strategy in TOR has been to work with vertically integrated cigar makers. So you look at our portfolio, we work with guys who farm, who've got fields. So we know they're going to make cigars. We know that the quality won't suffer. But we also know the quality won't suffer. The quality and the quantity won't suffer. So thankfully the strategy we put in place a while back was the right one, and for COVID and post-COVID, well, if we're ever post-COVID, is working in our favour, that we can get constant supply.
Because I guess if you went for a brand that's buying its tobacco from X factory and then producing its own custom rolls, you don't know whether they're going to be able to get that consistent supply.
Don't know if it's the same tobacco.
Exactly. And then that kind of, it makes it difficult for you as an importer, makes it difficult for all the retailers, and you obviously want to keep a good relationship with all the retailers that you have in this country. So
I'd say for some of the smaller brands, we're starting to see some of the smaller brands going to some of the bigger makers now, moving out of smaller factories to bigger factories. But the problem is you become a part of a queue then. You know, so if you're a cigar maker and you're making third-party cigars for someone else, I'm not saying they do this, but what would you prioritise, your own brand or someone else's brand?
Of course. No, it makes sense. I mean, if you do go to if you start going through a tough time, then you're going to start prioritizing your own brand, and that makes absolute sense. So it's smart in a sense that you're you're looking at the worst case and thinking, how do we prevent that from happening? Which is great, because as soon as customers become accustomed to a particular brand, then it's difficult to try and be without that. And perfect example, I think. But this wasn't because they have any issues internally with them. But Padron, for example, like Padron have been really difficult to get hold of, and they had to, I guess, prioritize the US market. It's the biggest market in the world for cigars, so kind of left us without any Padrons.
Yeah.
How are we looking on the Padron front at the moment in terms of like stocks or supplies?
I would say that we're going to be fully stocked of Padron within the next 10 days, actually.
Within the next 10 days? That's amazing. So we could expect.
So we've been working on that with George, and I saw George last week, and I kicked him. He's still got 2 knees, but he wasn't able to supply the American market fully either.
Wow.
So it's not just the UK; it's Europe or
because they're quite small in terms of production.
Yeah, they have a cap on their production.
Exactly, because they want the quality.
They're not going to mess around.
Precisely.
So
and Padron's known for that high level of quality.
Absolutely.
They're not going to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're not going to water it down.
No, they special. You know, they age the tobacco 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
So you need to age that tobacco for 10, 12 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just start throwing in stuff that's been grown last year.
Yeah.
You've got to do it properly. So
Precisely.
George is adamant that this is the ceiling. This is what we'll make. It's all sold.
Yeah.
But he has difficult decisions to make. So we weren't, you can imagine we weren't overly happy, but at least he explained it to us, and we live with that. But as I say, we got a shipment in April, and the whole shipment was sold to the trade within 24 hours.
Wow.
And this one that's due is the largest ever shipment I've had of Padron to the UK.
Finally.
And over 50% of it is already sold.
I'm very
already
happy.
Sold.
I'm very happy that the Padron cigars are back in the country.
Yeah.
But that is a question I want to ask. So, when we have such ridiculous supply, and we have such ridiculous demand, we don't have the supply because no one was expecting this, and the knock-on effects are still continuing. Is that going to push the price up quite considerably? Are we going to start coming to a situation where New World cigars are going to become a little bit out of reach for most people?
I would hope not. We've worked on the same formula for our pricing now for over 10 years, and it's worked. And our price points are, I would say, pretty favourable for the consumer. It is getting more expensive, whether it's the cost of shipping, the cost of fuel is increasing, the cost of shipping is increasing, it's getting harder to get slots, cost of material, boxes, rings. You're also seeing a bit of a exodus of people in Esteli trying to get their way to the USA to follow this golden path and make their millions in America.
Yeah.
Which means that the cigar makers are having to increase salaries to keep the staff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of knock-on effects at the moment within the industry. But what we do is we try very carefully to keep our prices competitive.
Yes.
As I say, we have a fixed formula that we've worked on, which has served us well over time. And we're not planning to change that, so we're not looking to profiteer out of the increase. We're happy with our margin, we're happy with our lot. We took a small increase in April, and I guess the big challenge this year is going to be what the government do in November.
Yes.
At the budget.
Yes.
Because the escalator is 2% above inflation, and inflation being over 9%.
Yes, so
we're very, very concerned of what might happen in November, not caused by us, but caused by our own government.
Of course.
So our challenge all the time is we look at ways that we can keep our costs tight and keep our prices competitive.
Yeah.
So I would say from our side of things, unless we had a couple of 40% increases from 1 or 2 manufacturers this year, but generally speaking, the increases have been about 10% as such. By the time they get passed on to the trade, they don't come out at 40, they might come out at 20, 25 because of the cost process that we go through. So our challenge will be to keep our prices competitive, and we want people to afford to smoke our cigars.
Absolutely. So as an estimate, would you say that, I mean, this is completely, off the top, but what kind of price increase, because we're going to see potentially an 11% rise in November. So by the end of this year, could we see an increase in prices by about 20 or 30% across the board?
No, I think that's extreme. Certainly from our portfolio, I'd say that's extreme. No, and even the 11% duty will calculate out at less than 11% at trade.
Okay.
Because it's 11% of the duty, which is only part of the calculation, not the full calculation. Yeah. So I'm hoping we may end up at 10%.
Yeah.
But maybe anything above that will be where a manufacturer has added extra on. But it is costing more to make cigars.
Exactly, yes.
So there's no doubt about this. It's a handmade product.
So there's a potential. Would you say there's a high high likelihood of manufacturers increasing the prices? Do you think that that's something that's inevitable?
Yeah, well, we've seen that this year. I think Half Wheel did a really interesting article basically listing all the manufacturers' increases. And it was basically nearly everybody that we represent was on that list. So I would guess that come the end of the year, we'll see something very similar.
Yeah.
But as I say, our challenge as an importer is to look at ways that we can spread that or reduce it, or can we save money on shipping and offset, and exchange rate at the moment isn't helping us either. I think we're 119 to the dollar.
Yeah.
Remember pre-Brexit it was like 156.
Yes.
That's a hell of a difference.
Massive difference.
So there's not a lot of things in our favour at the moment.
No.
So I can honestly say there will be increases unless the government have a moment of leave tobacco alone.
That's not going to happen,
but I don't see any pigs flying over London today.
No.
So we're guaranteed there will be increases, but I don't want to start scaring people by saying they're going to be 20, 30, 40%. I think they could be around the 10%-ish kind of mark overall.
Well, that's what happened with the Cuban cigars, right? Cuban cigars went up by a massive amount, and some of these cigars went up by a ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
And that's been, an interesting one, because a lot of people that enjoyed particular brands can no longer enjoy those brands because they're just prohibitively expensive. So has that impacted New World Cigars? How has that impacted the way that people consume cigars and what kind of cigars they consume?
That's a good question, because the day the Cubans went up in the UK, we had a record trading day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was working at home that day, and I got a phone call from Ruth, our operations manager, like, Scott, are we doing something are we doing a promotion that you haven't told us about? And like, no. And we put out a couple of phone calls I was saying, like, what's happening? She said, we're getting crazy orders. So I got the names of a couple of retailers and phoned them and said, what's going on? And the Cubans have gone up. I said, well, why are you buying more of us? I said, well, we need cigars. And, we need affordable cigars.
Yeah.
So we had a record trading day in our history that day.
Wow.
So there's your answer.
That's amazing.
So it's amazing. Unexpected, but obviously we'll take it.
Were there any particular brands that retailers were most interested in, or was it like across the board?
Really, really across the board. I don't know, we seem to be kind of lucky that almost every cigar we have in our portfolio sells.
Yeah.
So there's no, we have some brands that do better than others. But it was just totally across the board. It was almost like they went through our brochure and went, right, I'll have that.
So how did you manage that?
Well, fortunately we had good stocks in our warehouse, and we have pipeline of cigars coming in all the time, right through to January next year, already planned with manufacturers. So obviously you run out of some, there's nothing you can do about that.
Exactly.
But generally speaking, if we run out of something, we have something else to offer.
True, that's very true. One of the things that some people have been talking about is that as much as we're getting a bit of a boom at the moment in the industry, COVID kind of came in and made everyone want, sit at home and do nothing. So everyone was like, okay, great, we'll smoke cigars. And we've had this massive uptick, and you've got all these manufacturers buying up, as much farmland as they possibly can, because they want to increase production, and the demand is there. But only one thing needs to go wrong for things to kind of head in the wrong direction. I mean, we're going through a boom at the moment, but as with most industries, whenever we have a boom, there's a decline or a bust.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's going to be happening anytime soon?
America's slowing down. It's only up 5%, but that's after 2 years of wild growth. So it's still growing.
Yeah.
Even at 5%, it's still a massive growth.
Yes.
I think it will plateau, and then it may start to decline. But I think, again, going back to where we've been, our strategy of working with vertically integrated manufacturers, they will still be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their quality won't suffer. One of the dangers of the boom, so the history going back into the 90s when we had the last boom, 96, 97, I wasn't around in those days, but I've been speaking to the manufacturers to find out what happened. What happened was there would be a shortage of tobacco.
Yeah.
So cigars were getting made and sent out too early. So they weren't fermented, you get that ammonia smell, which, I've got to rest that for 6 months. You'd never have to rest a cigar for 6 months. It should be ready to smoke. So in the boom, at the end of the boom, people were just churning out cigars. Yeah?
Right.
All quality, and quality suffered. And I think what happened was certain countries got bad reputations for that. So the noughties gave us time, or gave the industry time to reset itself.
Yes.
So a lot of the smaller guys disappeared and went off and decided that they don't want to make cigars, but they want to go into another industry. And the real cigar makers, as I call them, the vertically integrated guys, stayed, built on quality, built up their crops again, built up their tobacco yields, and continued to be, produce the best of the best. I think the same will happen again.
So do you think we're gonna suffer through like poor quality tobacco for a while because of the demand?
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a case. I keep using this word, vertically integrated.
Yeah.
Where you've got a farmer,
Yeah.
they won't allow that to happen.
Of course.
So I think it's the brands who have to purchase
from
from brokers
that
are going to buy what they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
That could affect the quality. I'm not saying it will, but if history repeats itself,
which it usually does.
Maybe what you could call like a boutique kind of brand.
Yes.
May struggle to get the quality of the tobacco they got 3 or 4 years ago. There may be a danger that they're under pressure to get a volume out to a market, and they're under pressure then to basically supply what they've got rather than
supplying,
doing the fermentation process properly, the aging of the tobacco process properly, the aging of the cigar process properly, and the cigars come out not ready. So I'm actually comfortable for our business that the cigar makers we're working with have got good stocks and good yields of tobacco. And I think the quality we get from them is sustainable in the longer term.
Yeah.
I worry that some smaller guys who come into the industry like 3-4 years ago as on the booms here, let's make cigars, may not be around in 2 or 3 years' time because they can't buy tobacco, or the quality they're buying just might not be ready to make a cigar with.
Yeah.
That's what happened in the 90s. If history repeats itself, that'll be what happens again over the next 3-4 years.
One of the things that can cause a decline in an industry is if the customers are just not buying as much, right? That's one of the easiest ways to get a decline.
Yeah.
And that might happen potentially because, as people kind of go back to normal ways of living, and, people just stop buying as many cigars. Or if the price goes up too much to a point where people can't afford as much, then they may potentially buy fewer cigars. But one of the things that has happened for Cuban cigars is that there's been massive demand in China.
Mm-hmm.
What's the demand like? Do you have, do you have any perspective on this? Is the demand for New World cigars increasing in China? Is that something that the Chinese market are interested in?
I think it's growing all over the world, not just in Asia, China, Europe, UK. The demand and the interest, the interest and demand for New World cigars is just growing year on year on year. This is one of the, it's funny, we're in London today.
Yeah.
I call London the last bastion of Cuba. Okay? It's still Cuban-centric.
Yes.
I get that. I get the visitor profile to the stores, I understand that. But when you travel outside of London and you visit the stores in the Leeds and the Liverpools and the Manchesters and whatever.
You've seen the humidor that Ray's got in Leeds.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the share of business is 50-50.
Yeah.
And some retailers in the UK are now saying New World's overtaking Cuban. So it's happening.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, going back to my old marketing days where you have that ripple effect strategy or the seeding. You start in London and ripple out. The opposite is happening in the UK.
Yeah.
Where it's happening in the suburbs and working its way into London.
Way into the city, yeah.
And we're now selling cigars in places. Quite honestly, 3 years ago, I would never dreamt that we would have cigars on sale. Places like the Wellesley.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not decrying the Wellesley. They have their own strategy, but they now sell Tor cigars.
That's amazing.
And the Ritz Hotel. And places like that.
Well, the Ritz has been quite interested in New World cigars for some time anyway, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
And they make their own blend or something.
They do indeed.
Yeah, which is quite a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, speaking of the term New World cigar, so people in the US don't have this term called New World cigar. No. They just got cigars. And over here in the UK, we call them New World cigars because predominantly the main kind of cigar for a long time were just Cuban cigars. People would only smoke them. So, if I'm not mistaken, you came up with the term New World cigars. Gosh. Is that correct?
Well, we did.
Yeah.
But I remember when I got involved in Tor, I went out into the trade to see what is the market like.
Yeah.
So when you're taking a business, you look at the product, you look at the market and other stuff around business. So I went out into the trade, and you walked into a store, and you basically saw a wall of Cuban cigars. Yeah. And in the bottom right-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner would be a box of Nicaraguan, a box of Honduran, and the retailers would say, well, is that it? And they say, well, Cuban or non-Cuban, or Cuban and cheap cigars. Yeah. So that was the attitude of a Nicaraguan cigar or Honduran had to be cheaper for them to sell. So it was quite a challenge to think, right, okay, at the time we had some really, really interesting brands like Padron, like Oliva, and it was a case of saying, right, individually, if you said to someone 12 years ago, Padron or Oliva, they would look at you blankly. They wouldn't know what they were.
In the UK, I guess they would, yeah.
So even our own Sheraton brand, which we bought from Dunhill, that was available in those days. But so it's like sitting on a train coming down from the far north back to Devon. And you can tell from my accent, I'm a Devonian. I was just thinking this through, thinking, individually, the brands were not recognised by UK consumers.
Yeah.
So how do we collectively create a strength? So it's not rocket science. It was a case of trying to think the wine market, the whiskey market. You have the whiskey without the E and whiskey with the E. You have French, you have New World wine. But you don't say French and non-French wine. Scotch and non-Scotch whiskey. Yeah. So I thought, well, why can't we just call it New World cigars? Yeah. There are guys who out there say, oh, you shouldn't call it New World because it's the old world and all the rest of it. But that wasn't the point. Yeah. So what I did was I checked with some manufacturers to say, right, are you comfortable with me doing this? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Yeah, because at the time we had no volume. Yeah. It was pitiful. Yeah. So we created the New World cigar name. We trademarked it. So we actually owned the trademark for New World cigars in the UK. The funniest one was AJ Fernandez. approaching me to ask his permission to sell New World cigars, his New World brand in the UK. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. But it was really funny because I renewed the trademark last year.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise the original trademark went through on my son's birthday.
Oh, amazing.
Which is really fantastic.
Yeah.
So 15th of April 2011. So we've owned the trademark for 11 years.
That's incredible.
And we've started using it as the quality seal for New World cigars. Every cigar maker really comfortable with it, they see it working. And I think where we want to get to, and that day is not that far away, is it's Nicaraguan,
yes,
Dominican, Honduran, Mexico, and we can drop the New World.
Yeah, because that's what it's like in the US, right? They just look at they consider it as cigars from the place of origin. So it's a Nicaraguan cigar, it's a Honduran cigar, it's a Dominican cigar, and ideally, yes, that would be great if we could have it like that in the UK and potentially Europe as well.
We couldn't do that 10 years ago.
No,
because people, it's like just now with Mexico.
Yeah,
Mexico are making Casa Torrent are making fantastic cigars.
Lovely cigars.
And the thing is, most people that have smoked a New World cigar will have smoked his tobacco. Yeah, whether it's on a Padron or a My Father or a True Estate or Hoya or whatever. So they know the company, but just don't know. Sorry, they know the tobacco, but don't know the brand. So we're going through that stage of Mexico, of Nicaragua 10 years ago. Yeah. So people now recognise Nicaraguan as like, it's the powerhouse now. It's the biggest producer, it's the most awarded. Yes. So Nicaragua is the place to get a cigar from. And 10 years ago, if I'd have said that, people just laugh at me.
But could you potentially do it now though? Because we're now at a 50-50 split. We're at a stage where people are aware of what Nicaraguan cigars are all about. There isn't a stigma against Nicaraguan cigars. If anything, it's a premium. It's kind of something to be proud of, right? When you think of Nicaraguan cigars, you think of Oliva, you think of Padron. These are incredible cigars. These are some of the best cigars that you can buy. So do you think we're at the stage where we can?
We're not far away from it.
Okay.
But there's things that we're working on where we'll use the New World for a few more years. Okay. Okay.
So do we have a date then? Let's say 2025, or we can get rid of the...
Maybe I, as Kenny Dalglish would say, maybe I, maybe no. So we'll see. What's really fascinating for me is when I go to like the PCA and hear people talk about New World cigars. Wow. From all around the world, and that's like
that must be quite a proud moment.
It's just crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. It's just I don't think I'm the most super intelligent person on the planet. It just seemed like the obvious thing to do at that moment in time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's really spiraled, and it's really fascinating, honestly, to listen to guys from like Dubai and Austria and all around Europe talking about New World cigars. But what I'd never want to do is, it shouldn't be Cuban and New World. It should actually be all cigars, actually, in my opinion. Because I think as people are experimenting and trying and finding their way through the humidor from different countries, they should just enjoy the cigar.
Oh, absolutely.
And then where it comes from is actually secondary. And that's where I actually want to get to, is that all cigars are given the equal status.
Definitely. I think that this notion that just because a cigar is from a particular place makes, because it's not it would be foolish to say X is better, because it's not about better, it's about different.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely different terrain, different sunshine, different. So it's just different how it's made.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that.
We're very careful. If you look at our portfolio, we deal with small families. Okay, they're not as small anymore, some of them, but we deal with family businesses. Yeah. We don't have a corporate company in our portfolio, and we're really proud of that. What that means is I've got access to George Padron. Yeah. Okay, you could turn that round and say, he's got access to me. Yeah. Well, that's my ego. But the same with Oliva, with Fred, and I won't pronounce his surname, Van der Marlière. I win a prize for that in Belgium. And the same with my father, with Johnny Garcia,
Yeah.
and Tatuaki, with
Yeah.
Pete Johnson. We WhatsApp and we talk to each other. You go to a corporate world and you say, right, who do I deal with? And you'll be given Fred from an office in wherever.
Tony from accounting or
I've
something.
spent 20 odd years working in the corporate world before moving into this wonderful family environment. And it's really, really refreshing. To say working with families means more to them because their name is on the cigar.
Of course.
So if
It's
your
their
name
family
is
history.
on, if it's a Cigar Ranch cigar, you will have the best cigar in the world.
No one's going to
But
buy
you
that.
are going to make sure the quality, the tobacco, everything about that cigar is spot on. You're going to be proud of that.
Of course.
Or you're not going to release it. So that's a big thing for us, you know. And then when you look at the trade we deal with, like if you look in the UK, most are family businesses.
Yeah.
So we're working with family on the supply,
And you're
we're
working with
working
family
with
on the
family
retail.
at retail.
Of course.
So it's a real
Must be
niche.
quite a nice kind of vibe, and the
Yeah.
feeling is quite, welcoming.
4 weeks ago, I was invited to one of our customers' wedding.
Oh, that's
Now,
lovely.
how cool is that?
That's very cool.
It's really lovely.
That is.
So Ricardo and I went along to this lady's wedding. I mean, she's been to Nicaragua, Mexico, and Dominican on our tour tours, as we call them. So she's become a friend. But it's still, I can't think of many industries where you would be invited to your customer's wedding. You know?
Yeah.
It's really lovely. So
I agree. It
we
is.
kind of look after each other in our own way. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of competition out there.
But it's
but
good
ultimately-
competition, yeah.
Retailers, good retailers, know they need good distributors. Because if we screw up the supply chain, they don't have stock.
Yeah.
They don't have stock, they don't have customers. So the retailers know they need the distributors, but we know we need the retailers.
Of course.
Otherwise, we've got a problem
Yeah.
if we can't sell our product. So the role of the distributor is very, very simple. We add value to the manufacturer and we add value to the retailer. That's it.
Yeah, I
That
guess.
is it, simple.
Precisely.
And if we're not adding value, the retailer will kick us out.
Yeah.
And if we're not adding value to the manufacturer, they'll kick us out.
Yeah.
So that's our constant challenge. It's a very simple philosophy. We've got to add value up and down the supply chain.
Are there any particular brands? I mean, this is not to say that these are brands that you're going to be working with. This is just like your personal thoughts and opinions. But are there any particular brands that you're kind of looking at and you're interested in them, and not as a supply, not as something that you, but just from a personal perspective, you're like, oh, this is a brand that you might want to keep an eye on. This is a brand which I find quite interesting. Are there any particular brands that caught your attention at the PCA? Going back to the PCA now.
What, that we don't represent?
Yeah.
There's a couple of smaller companies which I'm impressed with how they're going about things, how they've set up their own production, how they've started to farm, so they're starting to get into the vertical supply.
Which companies are these?
You might find out in the next 12 months or so. But I go with a kind of checklist.
Yeah.
And stuff that I want to know is like social responsibility.
Right.
What do they give back?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are
This
they
is something
just
that
in it for the money?
This is something that Ricardo and Caldwell are very interested in as well. So yeah.
Yeah, are they just in it for the money? Or are they interested in actually making the world a better place? It sounds, I don't like this kind of evangelistic kind of
But it's important.
thing, but to me it's really important, having been to Nicaragua
Yeah.
and seen what people like Hoy de Nicaragua, Drew Estate, Padron, they all of them, to be fair,
Yeah.
do to give back to schools or to the staff. The medical area in like AJ Fernandez factory is better than anything you'll get in the UK. It's incredible. And the same with Drew Estate. It's hard to explain. So they look after their people really well, but they also look after the next generation through education as much as they can as well.
Well, there's a knock-on effect though, isn't there? Because if you're looking after your people, and they're going to be more likely to do a better job.
Well,
and
they'll look after you.
Exactly. And if you're doing a better job, then ultimately, as consumers, we're going to have potentially a better product, or more than likely a better product. So there's it's not just, I mean, yes, you have to do these things because it's your responsibility to look after the people that you work with, but also there's a benefit for everyone. It's not just, it doesn't just benefit them, does it?
Absolutely. I kind of went off at a tangent, but again, it's to explain. So at the PCA, when we're talking to you guys, those are the kind of things I want to know. What do you do to give back? And if they look at me blankly, that's a big cross. Yeah. One of the person we're talking to told a fantastic story how they've just bought a house for one of their staff. Wow. Could you imagine that? And they told the story why, and it's a great story. It's a very humbling story. But okay, that's a big tick in my book. What are they trying to do for sustainability? What are they doing corporate governance? So those kind of things are important to me.
So the way that they manage the environment, is that quite an important thing to you as well?
You know, replanting trees, irrigation, everything that they're doing. People like Olive are really at the forefront of this, which is incredible what they're doing. But all the cigar makers take their responsibilities really, really seriously. So again, when we're looking at who we work with, those are important things to us. You know, Brexit has temporarily killed our plans because we were working on our green program and, you know, shipping from Europe. Now we're shipping from Nicaragua, so our carbon footprint's gone, you know, crazy.
Is there any way to combat that at all?
Well, we're working on plans on how to do that. It's not a short-term fix.
Yeah.
But we have solutions. We just need to work out how we actually manage that solution. We know how we're going to. We think we know how we're going to do it, but it's complicated. And I'm not going to spend an hour explaining it. But we have ideas on how to do that. But as I say, the PCA is a really interesting thing. So our manufacturers that we work with, we know already. And you guys, I want to know. I want to look at the white of their eyes.
Yeah.
And see what kind of people they are. And if they're just in it for the money, then they're not for me.
Fair enough.
They're not for me.
Well, so, Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Okay.
And like I said, this is something that we were really excited about doing. Okay. We've been trying to get hold of you for a while, but you've been really busy. But thank you so much.
We're going to talk about our 30th anniversary.
Your 30th anniversary?
This year.
Oh, please tell us.
Our big...
completely missed that
one. It's our 30th anniversary.
Yeah, we've done our research, haven't we?
I thought that's the reason you wanted to see me. No, this is our 30th anniversary.
Wow.
But only people know about us, I would say, seriously from the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So we started as a wee business in Devon with a husband and wife team, Mark and Sandra Action, in a place called Dawlish. Beautiful location.
You're still based in Devon as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we're still based in Devon. And Mark and Sandra took the business. They started with dried Dutch cigars, which is, you know, machine made. And that's what they started before they slowly started to move into the long filler market. But they retired in 2007, sold their shares, and then, anyway, I got involved around about 2009-10 as a consultant, and eventually took it over. And this year we celebrate our 30th anniversary. We held a trade event in May at the Ignite trade show, and I managed successfully to catch COVID that week for the only time, and missed our 30th anniversary trade party. So there you go, my big celebrations. So this year we are planning October to be a kind of October. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
To get some events together to celebrate New World and Tor. So watch this space for October.
Can we come?
When we work out the plan, I'll let you know. Work in progress. Everything's work in progress.
A very diplomatic answer.
So there you go. So yeah, big celebrations for us.
That's fantastic. 30 years, and that's incredible. And you know, the amount that Tor has achieved and what you mean to the industry now is huge. So, I mean, I'm just very thankful.
Thank you.
I'm deeply thankful for what you do, the kind of cigars that you bring. It's great to know the process behind how you select these brands, as much as you're interested in how their production and whether they're vertically integrated or not, which is a term that you seem to love, but as much as that is important to you, what I find quite heartwarming is the fact that you're deeply interested in how they treat their staff, what they're doing to give back, how they're managing the environment. These are things which I think a lot of people kind of maybe take for granted, or maybe don't pay too much attention to, because it's not it's not in the account books. And
you have to go there. So the first time I went to Nicaragua, I got taken to a school. Honestly, it's the most humbling experience in the world, where the kids are, it's like something out of the TV charity things you see, where the kids are singing to you at the class, and it's really, 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 really humbling. Wow. And it's thought-provoking, and you think, well, what can I do as an individual to help these guys?
Of course.
And it's not, it's really genuinely not a ego trip or whatever. It's like, how can you help these people? Because you leave with such a heavy heart. Think, God, these kids are coming to school at crazy hours in the morning, leaving at crazy, to go and then do a job to, this is primary school, to bring money into the household, and it's hard to explain. One of the best things I saw is like, for the kids to graduate, the girls have to make their own pinafores in the sewing room. And the boys have to make their own trousers and stuff. And I think, oh, could you imagine that in the UK? And it was
I'd be terrible at it.
But I looked at their equipment, and it's like, like something out of the 1960s, the Singer factory in Clydebank. So I'm really, really proud that one of the things we've been able to do at Tor is we now have a sewing room that we've kitted them out with, to give them. My wife is she makes curtains and all this kind of stuff as a hobby. So one of the great things we were able to do is kit out that sewing room with modern machinery and safe machinery, because obviously it was just crazy. The old black machines that you can visualise that are your foot on the pedal. But that's what the kids have to do, and it's like, wow. And they're sharing their lunchtime food with you, and you're like, I shouldn't be eating this, I shouldn't be eating this. You just come away thinking, what can you do? Nick Hammond's a big supporter of what we're doing with his book as well. And it's just very humbling. So if that's how we feel, we think our partners should feel the same and do the same. So it's a two-way street.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
It's been an immense pleasure talking to you.
Good.
And getting to know more about what Tor Imports does. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Good. So we can open the windows now and let some cool air in.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Before I melt. Brilliant. No, thank you very much indeed.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, hit the like button, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.
Thank you.